Hi, Aries Sun and Rising. Welcome to a video looking at the transits of both Neptune and Saturn in your sign of Aries. Now, Neptune entered Pisces back in 2011, so it's been in your 12th house for many years, and now it's going to come into your first house on March 30th, and Saturn is going to enter Aries on May 24th. Both of these planets will eventually turn retrograde later this year and go back into Pisces as the year ends. So they're not going to stay in Aries. 2026 is going to be the year when you're probably going to notice the steadiness of both of these planets in the first house a lot more, or at least in Aries. I have to make this disclaimer that this is a general reading. If you want to find out exactly when both of these planets will enter your sign, or it's going to enter your sign, and whether it's your sun or ascendant on the dates that I mentioned, but I mean in the first house, either the solar first or the natal first. I do have transit readings that cover the next 12 months whenever you order. And the thing is about this is that if you're listening to this recording and your sun is in Aries, it would be a really great idea to find out what your rising sign is, or to at least have your time of birth, because your natal chart is really a great way to look at these transits. The solar chart can be helpful too, don't get me wrong, but it can be more for your ambitions and things like that. But for an overall predictive type of a reading, the natal chart based on your time of birth, I feel is probably going to be the most accurate overall, based on what other astrologers have said and what they prefer to use, and my feelings, because I look at both. For me, I look at how this is affecting me with my sun sign. I'm a sun in Sagittarius, but I have Taurus rising, so I'm also looking at my rising sign that much more because of the natal chart. So if you're sun in Aries, please pay attention to your natal chart and listen to that video. If some of you already know what that is. All right, so I'm going to start by talking about Neptune, because that's the first planet to enter your sign. Neptune has spent the better part of, 14 years or so in Pisces, in your 12th house. Again, I'm pretending that everything is so nice and neat. And, at 0 degrees of Aries, it's going to be the cusp of your first house. But when Neptune is in your 12th house, it's in its own domain. And so it's very comfortable there, but you have to go by what the 12th house represents, which is, I was going to say unreality, but it's its own reality because it is the spiritual realms. And you can't say that the material world is so real at the end of the day, because it's temporary. We don't stay here forever. And every experience that we have is transitory. It might as well be a dream because it doesn't last. So there is that dreamy quality that you probably have become quite accustomed to, and may have led to some spiritual breakthroughs, perhaps. Maybe you've had some very vivid dreams, developed psychic abilities. And now Neptune is crossing over into your first house. And one of the reasons that I wanted to do Aries first is because, first of all, you're the first sign. And these are both, these are both in Aries, so it kind of made perfect sense. But also, you are going to be having such an important next few months. There's just like one thing after the other, and I feel like I really want to convey this to Aries people because Aries people tend to be very forward looking in their way of approaching life. And so once you're kind of like in the moment, but you're also, you're very spontaneous, but you're also always, looking towards the future and not looking at the past. So you can be kind of impatient for new things to come into your life. And yet, because you tend to be such an active person and somebody, being a cardinal sign, you initiate things so much. You're not like the typical Aries person is far from a passive observer of your own life. You're not like that at all. You're very like, jump right in and hands on. And so you may not be kind of necessarily, even if you're listening to different astrological reports in the recent months, you may not really like absorb this idea that this is a pivotal point in your life. Because, I mean, from where I'm sitting here, it's like I'm thinking about all these things. I did the March forecasts at the beginning of February, and I was just like stunned with Aries and all the stuff that's happening because you're going to, in March, you're going to have a Venus retrograde starting on the first of the month. You're going to have a Mercury, I'm talking about in your sign, going back into Pisces, but starting in your sign, and a Mercury retrograde mid-month starting in your sign. Then at the end of the month on the 29th, there's going to be a solar eclipse in your sign. And the very next day on the 30th is when Neptune goes into Aries. And then, of course, like I said, in May, Saturn goes into Aries. So it's like really a big deal. And by the way, that's the last eclipse of Aries. So it's not going to be any longer eclipses in Libra or Aries. So anyway, when we talk about the first house, this is your domain, Aries. That's another thing that, I wanted to point out is that this is the place where you rule, and therefore you are connected to what the first house represents, which is the self. And so when you have Neptune entering this sector, it can really obscure the self. But here's the thing. I honestly believe that this could be very helpful for the average Aries person because there tends to be a cockiness, there tends to be this aggression with Aries that is connected to, first of all, I mean, it doesn't hurt, or you could say help, that you're ruled by Mars because that can make you aggressive in that sense. But just this sense of self can be shaken to your core because you may feel like you don't know who you are anymore when you were so sure of it up until now. And when a planet enters a house, we can expect that there will be some kind of, if I use the word crisis, I don't want to make it into something horrifically bad because it's really about a catalyst more than anything else. So, in order to have these influences happen in these houses, there has to be some new energy that is throwing things into, you could say, disarray, or creating stimulation or influence that causes something different to kind of transpire. So Neptune is represented with mist or clouds, haze, because of its indistinct nature. It's boundaryless. And, Neptune rules the sign of Pisces, and this is one of the reasons why sometimes people, or Pisces gets this rap of being spineless or otherwise prone to be taken advantage of because they don't have that natural ability to set boundaries. And it doesn't have to be like a bad thing, because actually the spiritual experience where we transcend the rigid boundaries of like the worldly influence versus, like when you're living in the world, when you're like kind of very grounded and that kind of thing, you can look at heaven or the spiritual dimensions as something out of a fairy book or just hard to even wrap your brain around. But for some people who are very well versed in the, maybe out of body experiences or things of that nature, they're able to be both in the world, but not of the world at the same time. And one of the reasons why they're able to do that is because they have developed this skill to kind of like go back and forth. And so, and that's like compared to like somebody who's a schizophrenic who may have some of those abilities, but they're highly uncontrolled. So they can't really turn it on and off. So they can like lose touch with reality because they're not really aware that there is this kind of a boundary that they're crossing. So in any case, because the first house is the house of the self, this can relate to the body. This can relate to the way that you present yourself to others, the way that you're seen by others. And, maybe it's even, a lot of your persona and stuff like that. And so Neptune can, first of all, give you more of a spiritual aura, meaning that maybe you have this spiritual awakening. It might have been when Neptune was in the 12th house that this happened. And now perhaps you have softened. You have become more humble and less cocky and more patient and less hyperactive, ADHD, like you can't sit still. You have to always be moving. You have to always be doing something. You might have been practicing meditation and you've learned how to be still, be here now. And if you're somebody who has been really comfortable with this idea of who you are, your crisis might be like, I don't know who I am anymore. And, like for instance, if somebody is going through a midlife crisis, for instance, because Chiron is in Aries still. I think last time I checked, it was in Aries. And the thing is that if you have your natal Chiron, if you're like a Gen Xer, then you may be around the age of 50 right now if you have Chiron in Aries and you're having your Chiron return. And this, so you've had Chiron in the first house for, years already. And it's kind of like a midlife crisis because it comes about when you're at the age of around 50, maybe a little bit, maybe in your late 40s. And it's also like the second Saturn return, which happens in your late 50s, where you're kind of assessing the progress you've made. And so there's kind of like, there can be like a similar theme with Chiron to have your Chiron return, but then to have all these other things, it's like, wow. So yeah, Chiron can have kind of like a Piscean or Neptunian influence as well, and even like past life influence. So the bottom line is that for some Aries people who may have even been a bit arrogant, I'm not saying that all Aries people are arrogant. As a Sagittarian myself, I think that fire signs are often accused of being arrogant or regarded as being arrogant, and Leo's the other fire sign, just because we have a sense of self, we have a sense of individuality, and not everybody naturally has that. Some people really do, they don't really tap into themselves that way, I would say. And so it is a big deal when somebody who has this naturally suddenly doesn't feel like they do, and they're kind of questioning themselves at a deep level. But I want you to know that I think that overall this can be a wonderful thing, because like I said, it can soften you and it can humble you. And the great qualities of Aries, coupled with a newfound humility, can be like a wonderful upgrade, if you will. But this may even affect how you take pictures, because Neptune is photography, and when you have Neptune in the first house being your appearance, you may look different to people, maybe even when they see you from one day to the next, because there's always a shape-shifting quality. And in addition to that, the way that you look and the pictures that you take may not be the same. You might stare at these pictures and say, how can this possibly be me? Now, it could be on the good side where the pictures look better than you think you look in real life. So I guess there's that. But you might just in general have this very otherworldly or glamorous aura, almost like a movie star. And that might benefit you in some way at a subtle level, where other people are very intrigued by you, attracted to you, and things like that. You may be undergoing, like I said, a lot of spiritual transformation, and it may, since I think of the first house as like kind of, well, first of all, it is like a whole new cycle. And then on top of that, it's the house that can deal with your life as a whole. It could really add a spiritual influence to that life. As far as Saturn goes, Saturn enters Aries on May 24th. When Saturn is in the first house, a person may feel like they want to get their house in order, meaning their life. You want to get all your ducks in a row. And this can be because you're taking yourself seriously. Yourself is the first house, and Saturn is about being serious. So if you've had any kind of issues related to problems getting your life together, maybe even addictions or things that have come from a lack of discipline, a lack of organization, this can be the time when Saturn is in the first house where you feel like you're taking yourself more seriously, and that leads to changes in behavior. This is a really great time to lay down foundations for your future in general. I remember I heard an astrologer say that back, probably it was 2014, maybe. I believe that Saturn was in Sagittarius from 2015 to 2017, but I don't know if perhaps it actually began in 2014. But I heard that, and I was contemplating starting this business, which in 2025 will celebrate 10 years. And my YouTube channel that came about from that. I had the channel, but you know what I mean, making videos. And so when I heard this astrologer say that, I really became more intentional about the things that I was doing, because I felt like, yeah, you do things now and they can pay off in the future. Now, whether or not I did the kind of things that you could just sit back and just never do it again, I don't know about that, because I wasn't really thinking that far ahead. But you might be. You might be in a place, Aries, where you already have your own business and you want to take it to the next level. You really want to automate it, or so that you don't have to really spend so much time dealing with it. Because Aries is a sign, being a fire sign, loves freedom. And part of that freedom is being able to call your own shots. I think that a lot of Aries people, or people with prominent Aries, or, like if it's your rising sign or your moon sign, do better when they are the ones who are, kind of like deciding what they do and when they do it. But sometimes you do have to work for somebody. You find yourself in that position, and it doesn't mean that you cannot initiate something for yourself. Maybe you start a little business on the side during this Saturn transit, and it grows into something more. Especially if you feel trapped in your job. This may be something that could be like an afterthought, that you never even really pay it much mind. And at the very moment that you need it to kind of work out in your favor, it does, because you had the foresight to kind of lay down those foundations. And even though you can't predict that life is going to be smooth sailing 100% of the time, regardless of the preparations you make, you still may have this gratitude after the fact, after several years, when Saturn has left Aries and left your first house, that you breathe a sigh of relief, like, thank God I did this, because even though it may not be perfect, at least I have something to fall back on, things like that. But Saturn is also about just taking yourself seriously. Maybe you have talents that are untapped, and part of the problem is you don't feel like other people would see you in this positive light, and you may not trust your loved ones. You might be like, oh, they just are going to always think I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. So what do they know? But I mean, of course, they could be telling you the absolute truth, that you are a very talented person and that you have the ability to perhaps, be successful. And when Saturn is in the first house, you may feel this strong desire to get it together, go after your dreams, as well as ground them into reality and working on this sort of thing. If Saturn, I'm sorry, if If you're a rather freewheeling person, which, if your sun is in Sagittarius, I mean, obviously, if your sun is in Aries, but if your sun is in Sagittarius or maybe Gemini or some sign that tends to be very spontaneous, live in the moment, and that kind of thing, this can make you more serious all of a sudden. You may not be like really up for a lot of time wasting because you might be quite ambitious at this time. And in some cases, you may even appear dour to others, where they see you as overly serious. And that may confuse you because if you have this image in your mind of how you are just like a lot of fun and all of that kind of stuff, and then all of a sudden people are seeing you in that way, it might even be like, oh my gosh, have I just like aged 10 years because Saturn is father time. So people who have their natal Saturn in the first house, or they have Capricorn rising, they can tend to give off that stern vibe or that dour vibe where it's just like other people may kind of leave them alone, knowing that they're, uh, these people are very strict. I don't know how else to put it. But again, you can make a lot of strides in your life during this time when Saturn is here. Now, Saturn and Neptune are strange bedfellows in the first house. What I would say is with Neptune, you can morph into your ideal self because Neptune, you can use that energy of Neptune for like visualizations for what it is that you want to be. With Saturn, it can be about the discipline with your body. So if you want to remake your body in some way, your physical appearance, you have the discipline of Neptune, but the vision of the discipline of Saturn and the vision of Neptune. So that can be good for your physical appearance or any kind of behaviors in general that you want to change, improve, and so on and so forth. Saturn will remain in Aries until 2028. Like I said, it is going to retrograde later in 2025 and go back into Aries for good in 2026 until 2028. Neptune it will also retrograde back into Pisces, but then it will remain in Aries until 2038 because it has around a 13-year transit. All right, Aries, that's what I have for you. I hope that you're excited about this and about these transits. If you would like a private reading looking at your upcoming transits in the next 12 months, if you have always wanted a natal chart analysis, I have a package deal called My Deep Dive, which has 2 full-length readings for a special price. Each of these readings is at least an hour long. And if you like the tarot, I have 3 reading package called The Whole Enchilada, and that includes a full-length tarot reading too. You can find out more information about all of my readings at the link below. Thanks for listening. Bye.